This happened around 20 years ago. Our family owned 2 apartment buildings, 3 units each. We lived in 2 of them, rented out the other 4. There's nothing but these 3 flats lining both sides of the road for about a mile. Not all have parking. On the side streets are houses and very little street parking. We had more land than most of these units, since it was also our home, so we had parking for around 16 cars. Everything was fine for literally decades. Then cars started appearing in our parking lot that were not our tenants. I blocked one in one day. Went outside to see this hole, drove through our bushes and across the yard to get out. I called the cops. Nothing they could do. So I called a tow company and had them put up signs. We'd have to call them to have a car towed. The signs seemed to work. No more random cars. Until New Year's Eve, 1 year. I arrive home and every space is filled. There are even cars on the street blocking the other cars. I'm beyond pissed. I called the tow company. They can't do anything for a few hours because they're so busy. We're in the Chicago suburbs. It's below 0 outside. I have an idea. I dig out the lawn sprinkler and hoses. I run one hose inside to the laundry room faucet and turn on the hot water. This way the hose and sprinklers won't ice up, but the cars and ground sure did. 3 sprinklers moved every half hour or so for almost 5 hours. Every car, every square inch of the parking lot, the street by the cars, encased in ice. I made it a point to spray ice in the locks, between the window seals and glass, in the grills. Put away the sprinklers and hoses. Went to bed. 4 a.m. Furious pounding on the doors. Doorbells ringing nonstop. We just smiled and called the cops. Waited until they arrived and went outside. Cops were holding back laughter. These people were told to park here by their friend who owned an apartment several buildings away. The same idiot who drove over our bushes. I pointed to the tow sign and told the people to move their cars or get towed. In our town, cops can ticket on private property with the owner's permission, so all cars were ticketed. They were also towed since nobody could get in their vehicle. Wish we had it on video. Let me preface this by noting that this revenge was not my doing. At least, not exactly. It happened back in the 90s when I was in high school and centered around the type of school I attended. So, in case you weren't aware, it's very common in agricultural communities to have what are known as farmers' schools. That's not a technical term, but more just something easy to define. The schools are generally organized by the local farmers, and while you still study the various courses needed to get into college, you also study farming technology courses and get credit hours for work. Study. I working on 1 or more farms. The area I lived in was surrounded by a number of large farms which grew cotton primarily. So during the year, we'd spend time out in the field both tilling, planting, and harvesting. One of the farms near the school was this 1,000-acre spread that, like the others, grew mostly cotton, though sometimes they rotated to soybeans or silage, basically corn, but you don't harvest it. This farm had a long partnership with the school, so the students provided near-free labor for the farmer. The farmer leased this property from some out-of-state owner and paid them a portion of the revenue from the harvest. Imagine my surprise then, when I and many of my classmates arrived at the farm to do our work study and the farmer instructed some to crew the sprayers and start spraying herbicide on the fields, while others, myself included, were to take tractors and discus and plow everything under. The farmer wanted every square inch of the fields returned to just dirt. We were shocked, to say the least, but after some discussion, we set to work. It took us the better part of a weekend to do so, and when we were done, the field was in a beautiful, if barren, state. The farmer thanked each of us personally and paid us about $500 each. Quite the sum for a 90s high school senior. We returned to the school, told our headmaster that the contract was completed, and he informed us that the farmer would no longer be working with the school, and we'd be sent to one of the other larger farms for the rest of the year and our work study. It was probably 2 or 3 months later before word started going around about why we'd been instructed to destroy the crop. Granted, these were just rumors, but based on how things turned out for the farmer, I suspect there's some truth to it. So, apparently the landowner had decided that he was going to not renew the lease the farmer had on the land. This lease renewal just so happened to fall a few weeks before harvest season would start. Given that the average cotton farm earns about $1,500 per acre, a 1,000-acre farm would easily net the owner $5 million. About 500, that being pure profit. I don't know what the farmer's lease was, but it stands to reason that it wasn't anywhere near that. So this landowner had figured out neat little tricks. Let the farmer get a good crop planted and then refuse to renew the lease. The farmer would leave the plants in the field and the landowner would just need to pay some contractors to come harvest it, and they'd earn a profit. Since at the time, the farmer's lease wasn't yet up, he decided to prevent that from happening. His act of revenge against the owner was to prevent them from cashing in on their hard work. Sure, it destroyed his farm, and he had to sell off most everything he owned to buy some property for himself, but he'd proved a point. The owner did try to sue the farmer, though the owner, really didn't have a leg to stand on, or so I was told. I think the court ruled that since the farmer was still under the lease when he had the land tilled under, then it was his property to do with as he wished, and thus the landowner couldn't tell him what to do with his property. I learned a rather valuable lesson from that man beyond what I learned about farming. That lesson was never, ever cross someone with nothing to lose. Edit. Cotton is one of the few crops which leave a negative nutrient value in the soil, meaning that after harvest, even if you till the dead plants under, or even if you till them prior to harvest, you won't have as much nutrients as you started with. That's why farmers will plant another crop, usually winter wheat, in place and then till it under rather than harvesting it. This is something commonly called a green manure, but it works to put nutrients that the cotton pulled out of the soil back into it. While the ground wouldn't have been completely dead or sterile, any crop planted on that tract of land without further treatment of the soil wouldn't have produced the same acre per acre yield that a comparable crop would have had he gone to harvest and planted the secondary crop, which means that the landowner would either have to plant the green manure and spend money that way, or pay by the ton to use artificial fertilizer. A little backstory. I'm an online artist and this took place when I was in my early 20s. There was a popular artist who calls himself a professional and works in the industries. I used to look up to him. Let's call him Zach. Lately, I noticed how Zach's art looked eerily too familiar to a piece of media I've seen before. So I looked up the images and found it too matched up to his art. He was directly referencing official art and profiting off of it by selling it on his print shops online. He didn't make any effort to make the reference detaches from the original piece. I confronted him about it, sending a detailed message not to do that and the possible consequences. I've seen artists in real life who are sued for over $100,000 and to the extent in jail for doing what they did. Instead of being professional and mature about it, he lashed out at me and took it to social media, telling me how wrong I was to falsely accuse him since artists use references and how I could get sued for libel. I was dumbfounded at how clueless he was not comprehending what I was talking about. He included my username, which my blog had links to my contacts, my emails, Facebook page, art accounts, and Instagram. His fans, including his group of friends, joined in sending me downright horrific messages to me. I had panic attacks resulting from the pure backlash of his enormous fan base. I constantly received hate mail, telling me how horrible I am as a person, how shitty my art was, and to the extent of death threats for almost an entire month. The last straw that broke the camel's back was when he directly referenced off of my art and made money off of it. I didn't know how to find a lawyer, and I feel hopeless and angry that I couldn't do anything about it. Later, it hit me if I can't do it, then maybe another artist can, or anyone holds the copyright. The last time I remember, Zach never credited any of these artists for his references. I looked into the art he referenced and examined each official company matching Zach's art. I used Google search to find anyone working for a said company, and voila, I found a staff member for a branch in a different continent. Let's call him Cody. I contacted Cody's Facebook and tipped him about Zach's activity through Messenger. I uploaded and sent a copy of their art and Zach's art for comparison. Cody just simply replied, "We'll contact our legal team. Thanks for the notice." Another week passes by, and during the time he constantly posts to every damn thing I post about in my art blog. And then, silence. I checked his print shop was removed. His response to my message was taken down from his social media. He stops talking to his friends publicly. Days later, a fan was asking about him, and he responded how he is no longer friends with them because they are very toxic hypocrites. One of his former group of friends contacted my friend and cried about how awful a bully he was. Of course, my friend didn't care. It was the most glorifying feeling I have ever rejoiced in. This would have been avoided if he at least heeded my warnings. How he handled the situation was not professional at all. About 5 years later, I had been informed that, apparently, he has a tough time getting back into the industry after there were allegations of his past copyright infringement. The biggest one was having a lawsuit with the big company Cody worked for. First time posting here, but I hope it's enjoyable. One thing I have to note is that both my wife and I are visually impaired, so we often respond based on sound. So I have a bag of Skittle gummies next to me on the table. When my wife hears the bag crinkling because I'm getting out some gummies, she often asks if she can have some too. Just now, I was getting out a bag of cat treats to give a few to our cats. I keep them in my computer bag, which is also next to me. My wife hears the crinkling and, assuming it's gummies I'm getting, asks, "Can I have some?" Me. Sure. I proceed to get out a treat and hand it to her. I figure at the very worst she'll notice it feels different in her hand and realize it's not gummy. Nope. She sticks it right in her mouth and starts chewing. "Wife, what's this?" I told her, and we both started howling and laughing. The kittens were still happy to eat the partially chewed treat. They're not very picky.